Coming up on Network Africa, hundreds protest in Khartoum as government's transition to civilian rule is delayed. Ugandan government minister jailed for corruption in iron sheet diversion scandal. And Tunisia's President Kais Saied rejects IMF bailout, calling it unacceptable. Hello and welcome to Network Africa on Channels Television. Thank you so much for joining us on the program. I'm Anne Mwawadu. Today we begin in Sudan, where hundreds of protesters took to the streets in the capital Khartoum as talks with the country's military rulers to bring in civilian government has hit a roadblock. Security forces met with demonstrations in Khartoum with tear gas and stun grenades, according to protester Walid Adam. No injuries were immediately reported, but protesters have rejected any settlement involving Sudan's military leaders following the 2021 coup. The demonstrations were led by a pro-democracy network, the resistance committees, and set off from southern Khartoum towards its government district. The renewal of street protests is coming just one day after the scheduled Thursday inking of the final settlement between the military and pro-democracy forces was postponed for the second time, and no new date has been assigned for the signing. A Ugandan court charged a government minister and her brother with fraud yesterday and detained them in a rare corruption case against the country's top official. The minister, Mary Goretti Kitutu, and her brother appeared before an anti-corruption court on charges of stealing roofing sheets meant for housing in the country's poorest region. The roofing sheets were destined for low-cost housing in the Karamoja area, an underdeveloped area of northwestern Uganda bordering Kenya and South Sudan. They were both charged with 2 counts of causing loss to the government and conspiracy to defraud. They have been detained and will appear in court again on April the 12th. Mary Goretti Kitutu is the minister responsible for Karamoja and its development, and the case has caused an uproar in Uganda. Ugandan opposition leader Bobi Wine, however, called the accusations against the minister a smokescreen, accusing President Yoweri Museveni's government of far worse. Staying in Uganda, urgent global crises like the war in Ukraine, the earthquake in Turkey, and the drought in East Africa mean that there's less food aid for people like Konga, who is a South Sudanese single mother living in a refugee camp in northern Uganda. Luckily for her and others, the elements in Uganda have not been as merciless as in the Horn of Africa, and rain means growth, but by how much? Take a look at this report.
Watering the neat lines of green salad leaves outside her thatched home, Susan Konga is preparing her kitchen garden for the next harvest. This year, the success of our tireless cultivation will be put to the ultimate test: complete self-sufficiency. A roughly 50% shortfall in funds this year has forced the United Nations World Food Programme, WFP, to cut off the food supply for hundreds of thousands of refugees in Uganda, the country hosting more than any other in Africa. After 6 years in Uganda, Konga must now rely entirely on the maize, cassava, and salad leaves grown in her small vegetable patch. The abrupt change in policy will make it difficult for her to adjust. Konga worries she won't be able to grow enough surplus produce to sell to pay for her 2 nieces' school fees and other basic household supplies like soap.
We are already aware, they already told us that they are going to give food according to categories. Not everyone will get food. But I plead to them, they should at least give food for everyone. Since we are not yet stable, the food should continue for everyone at least for more 2 or 3 years to come. Then there, at least we can, in the middle, we can plan for what to do for an individual. But now it is so abrupt that we cannot do it because all of us are vulnerable. Nobody can stand on his own.
WFP says vulnerable refugees such as new arrivals, the sick and elderly will continue to receive emergency food aid. But the organization's $180 million funding shortfall means others will have to be weaned off it.
Some refugees who, given emergency support that they received when they came to Uganda, and this emergency support is very important because it enables a refugee survive when they need it the most. There cannot be resilience if you do not receive emergency support when you're hit by crisis. But these people have been able to link into livelihood interventions, to work with our various partners and be able to stand on their own and be sustainable. And this is the third category that we shall be supporting and winning of food assistance.
Owners are having to make very difficult decisions because the needs are enormous globally. We, of course, have known for some time about the impact of the war in Ukraine. Earlier this year, we had the earthquake in Turkey and Syria. But as far as Uganda is concerned, we're not only competing for visibility on a global scale, we're competing for visibility in the region as well.
The rains have been good so far, but for Conga and others like her, surviving in the periods between harvest may be a struggle while they pray that rains do not fail.
Tunisian President Kais Saied has rejected what he calls foreign diktats from the International Monetary Fund, the IMF, which is in stalled talks with the heavily indebted country over a bailout package. It describes as unacceptable bailouts that, in his opinion, will lead to more poverty. Mr. Said's government reached an agreement in principle in mid-October last year for a nearly $2 billion package from the IMF, but that deal has not been approved by the Lenders Board, a key step to unlocking support from other international lenders. The IMF has pushed Tunisia to remove state subsidies on basic goods, especially fuel. It has also called for legislation to restructure more than 100 state-owned firms, which hold monopolies over many parts of the economy and in many cases are heavily indebted. Let's now speak with VOA reporter Victoria Munga. Victoria joins us online from Nairobi in Kenya. Hello, Victoria, and thank you for joining us on Network Africa.
Thank you so much for having me.
Give us an idea of how bad the situation is in Tunisia.
In Tunisia right now, the economic crisis continues and it's getting as bad as it can get. Right now, we see a lot of rising in food prices and commodities, essential commodities. The prices are going higher and higher by each day because we see a shortage in this food and medicine also as well. And we see the people, the locals here, experiencing low salaries because the government cannot pay for the jobs that they're doing. And so it's becoming a situation where there is a low income and at the same time the food prices are going up. And so the people are not able to afford the basics need because of this situation. And people are already saying that they have lost hope and faith in the government to ever be able to rescue the situation, the economic situation in Tunisia.
But the government has been in talks for the bailout, since last year, October, mid-October to be specific. But why is the president now rejecting it? Did something new come up? Did anything change?
It's true, this has been a push for a bailout for Tunisia of this nearly $2 billion because the government sought to get this help because so that they cannot run into bankruptcy. But we see the president made a turnaround and he believes that probably the international community wants to interfere with the Tunisians' situation and Tunisia's affairs. And we understand IMF, before they give you a loan or any grants, there are some of the conditions that they put in place. So chances here are that the government, or rather the president, Kais Saied, feels not able to conform, or rather to keep up with what the restrictions or what the conditions that IMF is giving. And so he feels like, he says that this will push the government, or rather the people, into more poverty. Most chances is that they're looking at the conditions that the IMF is giving in order to get this bailout. And then he believes that maybe this is not good for his country.
And now what is likely to happen? Let's say Tunisia does not take this bailout from the IMF. What will happen?
The first thing we'll see IMF being under pressure to drop, rather not to approve this bailout, because if in such a situation, and then so going out and going ahead to give out this bailout, then it doesn't sit so well. And so we see this crisis continuing to get into a full-blown situation where we understand that the Tunisian government has borrowed internally mostly, but then also there are some of the loans that are external, and some of them are due for payment in a few. So we're seeing a situation where the country is not able to sustain itself because of the pressure of paying the debts that are already due in a few months, others in a few years.
But currently, lots of migrants are already leaving Tunisia over the president's comments, which they found uncomplimentary. Some of them have said it is distasteful. But could this hurt the economy, or could this in any way actually improve the economy by freeing up jobs?
People migrating from a country, definitely it's most likely hurting the economy of the country, because then we see professionals moving from that country to go to another country to give their services there. So Tunisia will be left with people who are not like actual professionals, because all the professionals have left, and then they will not be able to make enough money to keep up, or rather to sustain the economy. And then we also see a situation where we're having unprofessionals running, affairs of, whatever industries be there. Is it medical? Is it production? We'll be seeing a situation where unprofessionals are running this. And then if you have people running out, or rather migrating from the country to another country, you see that the country will not be able to make enough money, even from the taxes of the people, to run the economy. So we see a situation where they will be limited in resources, because there is no manpower to work and to produce whatever the country needs at this particular time.
All right, thank you very much. I hope all that is sorted as soon as possible to relieve the sufferings of the people. But VOA reporter Victoria Amunga, thank you for your time on Network Africa.
Thank you.
And to other stories now, the Gabonese National Assembly and Senate have reduced the term of office of the president of the Republic from 7 to 5 years, and the election from 2 to 1 round. With the most recent constitutional revisions in 2018, which instituted a 2-round voting process, the amendments align all mandates at 5 years and return all elections to single-round balloting. 85% of votes supported the proposal in a combined session of the National Assembly and the Senate in the capital, Libreville. These changes, in particular the 1-round bailout, has been denounced by part of the opposition, which is currently very divided, as a means of facilitating the re-election of the head of state, Ali Bongo Ondimba, who has been ruling the country for over 13 years. Having succeeded his father, Omar Bongo, he ruled the oil-rich nation of West Africa for 41 years in 2009. Mr. Bongo, now 64 years old, is generally anticipated to seek re-election. Still ahead on Network Africa. United Arab Emirates rejects extradition of Gupta brothers to South Africa. We'll bring you the details. Please stay with us. Welcome back. You're still watching Network Africa on Channels Television. The United Nations has expressed deep concerns at the Burkina Faso's increasing clampdown on the media amid wider curbs on freedom in the West African country. Burkina Faso recently expelled correspondents from the Liberation and Le Monde newspapers in the latest move against the French media. Authorities have also suspended Radio International, France International, and France 24 broadcasts. Since military junta leader Ibrahim Traoré seized power in September, activities of all political parties and civil society organizations in Burkina Faso have been suspended.
We are deeply troubled by restrictions on media and civic space in Burkina Faso after the suspension of media outlets and the expulsion of 2 foreign correspondents amid wider curbs against freedom of expression in the country. In this period of transition, the protection of independent voices is more necessary than ever to enable scrutiny, to facilitate accountability, and to allow the space for the Burkinabe people to build a resilient, stable, and inclusive society together. The activities of all civil society organizations and political parties have been suspended in the country. We are particularly concerned that a journalist was expelled following the reporting on a video that appears to show extrajudicial executions of children in the northern town of Wahiguya. When such grave allegations come to light, it is the duty of the authorities to promptly hold thorough, impartial, and transparent investigations to establish the facts, and if applicable, ensure that those responsible are brought to justice.
UN expressed deep concerns Thursday by Burkina Faso's increasing climate.
The South African government has announced today that its request for the extradition of brothers Atul and Rajesh Gupta at the heart of a massive state corruption scandal involving former President Jacob Zuma has been refused by a court in the United Arab Emirates. Justice Minister Ronald Lamola said the government was informed on Thursday evening of a Dubai court's decision not to allow the extradition of the 2 brothers arrested in the same city in June. The 2 Guptas, along with a 3rd brother, AJ, of Indian origin, and a formidable trio of businessmen, are accused of looting the state coffers with the complicity of Mr. Zuma during his 9-year in power. The trio fled South Africa shortly after the establishment in 2018 of a commission headed by Justice Raymond Zondo to investigate the state's corruption. Today is Good Friday, as a day set aside by Christians all over the world to commemorate the death of Jesus Christ. It specifically marks the end of the 40-day fasting period for Christian faithful and the commencement of the most momentous weekend in history when the Christian Messiah was crucified. Pilgrims in Jerusalem are taking part in the traditional Good Friday procession and carrying wooden crosses along the Dolorosa to the Church of the Holy Sculpture, site of the actual historical Jesus' resurrection. In Indonesia, Catholics are reenacting the crucifixion when Jesus was nailed to the cross in an event fulfilling biblical prophecy. At the Rome's Colosseum, Pope Francis is expected to lead Good Friday via a circus ceremony, also known as the Way of the Cross, that's the Crucis. Also on Saturday, the Pope will celebrate an Easter vigil at St. Peter's Basilica. At a youth-focused event that marked the International Mine Awareness Day in South Sudan's capital, Juba, the chairperson of South Sudan's National Mine Authority, Barach Jukurich, has expressed regrets about the use of landmines in the country during decades of conflict. Singing their hearts out, some 50 South Sudanese students from 3 primary schools in the capital this list that the dangers of landmines and unexploded ordnances. Their sing-along song also talks about the action one needs to take if one comes across these dangerous items, which dot several key locations in their country.
I have seen the vehicles that have been hit by landmines, people that have been hit by landmines, and it would affect you. And this is what I said before, that we are even enemies to our own selves. We could do something that will affect us afterwards. By now you can do it, but tomorrow you will feel it that what you did yesterday was dangerous to yourself. One time we were fighting in Magui, that was 92, and one of our colleagues was just moving on the road. and he was hit by landmines. Walking with the two legs, but just after a while, he started, he was being carried, and he became a limping person, of course, he survived with one leg. So I have so many experience in this question of landmines. So they are more dangerous, and I don't. Well, though we participated in planting them, we are now regretting why we did that thing before.
The more we clear, often the more we find, both landmines and other explosive mortars and shells and so on. So I think we need to keep doing what we do, but support it more. It needs funding. In simple, it needs funding. 95% of the deminers out there, community liaison officers out there, are South Sudanese. We need to support the South Sudanese to clear land for South Sudan. And when we look at international treaties, we should not be holding South Sudan, or any country for that matter.
Zimbabwe's plans to enact a law criminalizing the recruitment of its health personnel by other countries. And that's according to the Vice President Constantino Chiwenga, who doubles as the health minister. Mr. Chiwenga, who considers the brain drain in healthcare professionals as good as human trafficking, says that stiffer penalties will be imposed on those accused of robbing the nation of its human capital. According to estimates, about 4,000 nurses and doctors have left Zimbabwe since February 2021. Just last month, the United Kingdom halted the recruitment on Zimbabwean health workers after WHO placed it on the red list, which denotes countries facing serious health personnel challenges. According to Zimbabwe's Medical Association, the country has about 3,500 doctors for a population of 15 million people. Today marks the 75th anniversary of the World Health Organization. The Director General of the World Health Organization, Tedros Ghebreyesus, while acknowledging this, says the vision of the founders was clear but bold, the highest possible standard of health for all people. Speaking to journalists in Geneva, Dr. Ghebreyesus said that the WHO Constitution was the first document in history to formally recognize health as a human right, and since then, the world has made significant progress towards realizing that vision.
The nations of the world had a vision. After years of war, they realized that it was better to work with each other than fight with each other. They realized that a healthier world was a safer world. Their vision was clear, but bold. The highest possible standard of health for all people. They debated and agreed what this organization would be and do in a document called the Constitution of the World Health Organization. Tomorrow marks the 75th anniversary of the day that Constitution came into force. The WHO Constitution was the first document in history to formally recognize health as a human right. Since then, the world has made significant progress towards realizing that vision.
There's always investigations that happen in that market, and we know that samples were collected. We've seen the data now where that exists. The challenge is that data was collected in January, February 2020, more than 3 years ago. We have asked repeatedly in the March 2021 WHO-China joint report, there are recommended studies that are in there. And to this day, we don't know if those studies have been conducted. SEGO published a report in June 2022 outlining studies that need to be done. And to this day, I cannot tell you if those studies have been done.
And finally on the program, followers of Kimbagui's church in Goma took to the streets to play music and singing to celebrate the Kimbagu's Day after the Congolese president declared it an official holiday in memory and recognition of the fight of Simon Kimbagu, born on the end of the 19th century, while Congo was still a Belgian colony. The Baptist mission catechist was credited with miracles of healing the sick and teaching the Bible. In April 1921, he inaugurated a movement that later led to the birth of his church. His preaching included a message of emancipation that brought him to the attention of the ruling Belgian authorities. They arrested him and then condemned him to death. His sentence was later changed, but he spent the rest of his life in prison. Years later, Kimbaguists, led by one of Kimbagu's sons, Joseph, founded the Kimbaguist Church, which received official recognition in September 1959. Well, this is where we draw the cuttings on this week's edition of Network Africa. Thank you so much for watching. And to all our Christian faithful, have a wonderful celebration. I'm Anne Mwawadu.